We see John Chisholm in the forefront there as we await. This is the door that leads to the holding cell area where we usually see defendants enter when they are coming in for court proceedings. This is where we've seen Dominique Heaggan Brown dressed in a formal tie and shirt, but still wearing handcuffs when he is brought into the courtroom. We have seen him go in and out of this door for some 6 days now, and this will be his final walk-in before he learns his fate.
And behind this camera lens, behind the glass that you're seeing through right now, is the gallery. You can hear some of the conversations, you can hear some of the talk. It is packed. Our crew on the scene says that every one of the 98 seats in this courtroom gallery viewing area has been taken. And you may recall that when the body camera video was shown, there were people who became very upset with what they were seeing. Members of the Seville Smith family, some gasping, some bending over in agony, very distressed by what they saw. Since that time, since this body cam video was shown in court, though, that things have remained orderly. There's been a lot of testimony, especially from the prosecution, only one from the defense, but that everyone in the courtroom has certainly behaved and wanted this process to play out peacefully, and it has.
Most legal observers say the longer the jury is out, the worse it is for the defendant. We see now that Dominique Heaggan Brown, this is during the trial that occurred. Now he is entering the courtroom, looking live. Fired Milwaukee police officer Dominique Heaggan Brown now entering the courtroom. He is just moments away from learning if a jury will send him to prison for last August's fatal shooting of Seville Smith.
And the judge who will be reading the verdict that was rendered by the jury is Judge Jeffrey Conan, longtime Milwaukee County Circuit Court judge, a no-nonsense judge who's kept things orderly and has made sure that this trial moves along, that there is not going to be a situation where a mistrial is called. There was a call for a mistrial after the body cam video. Let's listen in to the proceedings now as the jury begins to render its verdict.
Jeffrey Conan presiding. Your silence is commanded. Any cell phones, electronic devices, or recording devices will be confiscated due to court order. Any disruptions or outbursts will be subject to ejection or subject to arrest. This is a zero tolerance policy. You may be seated.
Case number 16-CF-5562, State of Wisconsin versus Dominique Heaggan Brown. First-degree reckless homicide. This matter is here for a verdict. Appearances?
John Chisholm and Ben Lindsay for the state.
Attorneys Jonathan Smith and Stephen Cohn on behalf of Mr. Heaggan Brown, who's present.
All right. Good afternoon. It's my understanding we have a verdict. Everyone will be identified in the jury by juror numbers 1 through 15. There will be no identification in public of any of the jurors' names due to court order. That also goes for anyone in the gallery who might somehow come across a name. It is ordered that those names not be disseminated. Having said that, ready for the jury? All right, bring them in. Everyone remain seated. Everyone stay seated. No all around. Everyone stay seated. No all around. When the jury comes in, everyone remains seated.
All right, we are getting very close. The jury not yet in the courtroom as we're looking live at Dominique Heaggan Brown, the accused in this case. Judge Conan being very clear that their faces are not to be shown, their names not to be revealed to the public. That is a court order he gave. This jury has been sequestered now during these entire proceedings, and we are waiting now to hear what they have decided. They have three options.
They do. The initial charge, first-degree reckless homicide. If they could not reach a verdict on that charge, they could then consider a lesser charge, two lesser charges, one being second-degree reckless homicide, and then homicide by negligent use of a dangerous weapon. So will they find him guilty or innocent? If guilty, was he reckless in what he was doing that day? Was Dominique Heaggan Brown reckless when discharging that weapon, or was it a case of negligence? That is something we will be finding out momentarily here.
As we watch Dominique Heaggan Brown talking with one of his defense counsel, Jonathan Smith, the preeminent defense attorney who has represented some of the most high-profile clients we have ever seen in Milwaukee, including some of the off-duty officers who were charged and then convicted and sent to prison in the beating of Frank Jude Jr.
The jury in this case, Michele, the first jury to be sequestered in Milwaukee County in 23 years, meaning they could not go home after the testimony, after their deliberations. They were taken to a place to make sure that they didn't have any opportunities to talk with anyone else who's been watching this very high-profile trial, and of course the case that started nearly 2 years ago. The makeup of the jury, 9 women and 3 men who are seated to render this verdict.
Yeah, they started deliberations around lunchtime yesterday, then decided to go home yesterday evening, just around dinner time. They returned to their hotel, resumed deliberations this morning, and then the word came just about 20 minutes ago that they have, in fact, reached a verdict and are ready to announce their decision to the citizens of Milwaukee.
What usually happens here is once the verdict is read, if it is indeed a guilty verdict, they will then set a date for sentencing in this case. But as we know, Dominique Heaggan Brown also has another unrelated case that he is involved in, a sexual assault case, and the trial for that is scheduled for August 21st with this very same judge, Jeffrey Conan.
It will be interesting to see if either side, after the verdict is read, will then ask for an individual poll to make sure that each juror says individually and clearly for the court that there is this decision. We do see that on occasion, especially on high-profile cases. It might just be a legal proceeding that seems natural in a case of this importance.
The racial makeup of the jury, 7 white and 5 African Americans are impaneled on this jury to render the verdict.
Have you selected a 4-person and your number only, please? All right, have you reached a verdict in this matter? Can you hand the forms to the bailiff, please? All right, this is in the matter of the state of Wisconsin versus Dominique Heaggan Brown, case number 16 CF 5562. We, the jury, find the defendant, Dominique Heaggan Brown, not guilty. Signed, the 4-person, dated this 21st day of June. State wish the jury polled. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for your jury service in this matter. Why don't we take the jury out for a second? All right, why doesn't everyone just stay in here for a bit? because we may need to bring the jury out and complete the matter.
We can hear the activity going on in the courtroom. To our viewers, though, we do have restrictions on what we can show. We are respecting Judge Conan's orders on what we can show. As the not guilty verdict was read out in court, seen live here on CBS 58, Dominique Heaggan Brown will not be going to prison for fatally shooting Seville Smith, just 23, in Sherman Park last August.
In this case, they found him not guilty of the charge of first-degree reckless homicide, which carried a maximum prison term of 60 years in prison. Before they went behind closed doors, they were instructed that if they could not reach a verdict on this initial charge, they could consider 2 lesser charges. They obviously felt they could unanimously come to an agreement that Dominique Heaggan Brown was not guilty of the charge filed by Milwaukee County District Attorney John Chisholm.
And as you saw there, Judge Conan offered to poll the jury. Neither side, neither the prosecution nor the defense, asked for the jurors to say individually aloud that they had reached their decision and stood by it. It was one very quick reading of not guilty.
And again, this case came down to whether or not the jury believed that what Dominique Heaggan Brown did was justified, whether he was acting as his defense attorney, Jonathan Smith said, in self-defense, or whether or not he was acting recklessly when he chased Seville Smith between those 2 houses and fired the first shot, which everyone agreed was justified, but it was the second shot that resulted in this charge of first-degree reckless homicide. The second shot that came 1.69 seconds later and at very close range, the shot that killed Seville Smith, striking him in the upper chest.
Our crews who are in the courtroom are saying the reaction we heard but couldn't see were in fact family members of Seville Smith. They were escorted outside of the courtroom, and we could see from our vantage point, it was then at that point that 2 officers with the court surrounded the defendant and the defense table as the judge said, let's wait, because they have some other proceedings they have to continue with after the reading of the verdict. Let's wait for things to calm down, and then we will proceed. As we look at the scene video from long ago, here again is a look at the jury, which, Mike, you have been talking about, and to give us a sense of their makeup there and the people who were deciding the fate of their peers, as we view it in the criminal court system.
Exactly. There were a total of 9 women, and 9 women, 3 men, 2 African-American males. There were 3 African-American females, 6 white females, and then 1 white male involved in this jury deciding the fate of Dominique Heaggan Brown.
We now see that the attorneys involved are having a conference, a sidebar, with Judge Conan, I believe. We can't see Judge Conan, I think, because ADA Lindsay is blocking the view, but I'm fairly certain that the judge is there, Jonathan Smith at the defense table as well. We now have an additional law enforcement officer who is around the defense table at this time.
After the shooting, after the charge was filed in mid-December, 3 months after the shooting happened, the family of Seville Smith issued a statement. We hope to hear from them after this verdict, obviously, but after the charge was filed, they said, quote, "We always believed that Seville should be alive today and that this rogue officer was completely wrong. Though the decision to prosecute cannot bring back Seville, justice is needed for our family as we continue to move through deep grief and seek justice for this wrongful death." Again, that from the family of Seville Smith in December of last year.
The not guilty verdict does not mean Dominique Heaggan goes free. He has another pending case against him, sex assault and prostitution charges. There are 2 men who claim he offered money to them in exchange for sex. The criminal complaint details that at least one of the victims claims to have been intoxicated and unconscious at the time that this man claims he was assaulted by a Milwaukee police officer.
We also hope to hear from Milwaukee County DA John Chisholm, who in his closing arguments yesterday said, quote, "That second shot is excessive force. It's not self-defense. No reasonable person would have thought They were faced with death or imminent harm. It's just not reasonable.
That sidebar discussion now going behind closed doors with Jeff Conan. We are standing by. This is CBS 58 News special coverage of the jury verdict in the Dominique Heaggan Brown excessive force trial. He has been found not guilty of first-degree reckless homicide for the fatal shooting of a 23-year-old named Seville Smith, who ran when Heaggan Brown and his partner at the time tried to pull them over and tried to get them to stop. As you'll recall, Heaggan Brown and his partner had been in the area. They noticed that this vehicle was parked awfully far away from the curb, an MO that they recognized as a possible drug transaction. And when they approached the car and tried to get the people inside to stop, as we saw on police body camera video, Heaggan Brown had to then chase Seville Smith into a yard, and it is in between two houses that the fatal encounter happened.